From the book, I've got this little table, which I suppose a couple of bits and pieces there. All I've done, and again, like I don't know the combination of questions, but I know that for short answer questions, if we're talking about 80 marks at the ABQ, we're talking about 80 marks. Like you're looking at 72 marks of an average. Generally what happens, and this is where that maybe a modified, nicer paper would work, would be that people would probably fall down on the last couple of questions. You might be very good at question 1, very good at question 4, and then when it comes into your last choices, people think like dive into marketing, it's easy and it's grand. It's not really, because you have to know what you're talking about in all those various areas of marketing. But like if you see a H1, for example, it's a minimum of 72, 72, and 54 4 times in a traditional leaving cert there. Okay? H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. I would be of the opinion that, and again, like I don't expect this to be a year where anybody is out to get anybody. That's if they're ever out to get anyone, but I can't see anything overly challenging been put on the paper for the year that's in it. For a H1, I'm thinking like you want to be up around 91 or 92%. 360 marks is the correct amount of marks, but you kind of 361, you'll be looking for between 360 and 368 makes you very safe. Okay, then again, you know, people who get H1s are probably going to be getting higher than that anyway. Couple of bits and pieces there. Watch out for, do you agree with the statement? Now, every year people don't bother with, do you agree with the statement? And it can be a yes, and some years it can be a yes or a no, and some years it was even a yes or a no or a maybe. I think the question was, should Ireland leave the European Union a couple of years ago? Maybe was going to be an option, and we got all these fancy essays of English teachers, I suppose, English teachers classes that had prepared for Brexit. But yes, no, maybe. A couple of years ago then the question was on the ABQ, the answer had to be no, because the person made a mess of organising a wedding, so no was the answer. But yes or no or maybe in context. There's usually a couple of soft marks available for that. There's not much difference between outline, explain, describe. No one's got a measuring tape to say how long do you have to write. You're looking for pieces of knowledge. If a student knows 1 or 2 good sentences, great. If they know a third good sentence, even better. Okay? So name and explain in most cases there, outline, explain, and describe. Looking down then into questions properly. And we start with Unit 1. And I'm looking there and like, you know, the notes and resources you'll have. If you go to www.leavingcertbusiness.com, you'll get the stuff there. If you click around, you'll find the file is there. You know, in relation to outline using examples, the relationship can exist between investors and entrepreneurs in business. I've overwritten the book here and said 4 separate parts to the answer, okay? It makes it nice and easy to correct, 4 separate parts. And you can overly talk about the entrepreneur and then overly talk about the investor. Giving too much information is generally better than being caught because you don't put enough stuff down. Make sure your cooperative relationship is win-win, joint action effort, mutual benefit, that kind of standard stuff. And then you incorporate the example in there and the entrepreneur, good business plan, investor, happy to invest, make profit, all the usual stuff. In relation to a competitive relationship, it's wise to say win-lose, and you can talk about competing on the basis of price, quality, labour, etc. if the investor refuses to fund the project. That's kind of generally a straightforward part. But yes, I see a lot of people come up with these other relationships. I've never seen, for example, the words dynamic relationship anywhere on a paper or a marking scheme, whereas cooperative relationships, competitive, yes, and generally the stakeholders, you're sticking to there. Okay, next question. Explain how consumers may benefit from the existence of a competitive relationship between producers. And I've given a sample answer. And the only bit of advice I'm giving you there is you must be very specific if you're going to pick something like Tesco as a producer. Okay? And you're kind of going, Tesco's not a producer. That part I know. But in relation to the exam, people write down Tesco, Aldi all the time, they get mentioned. If you're going to mention that, you're going to mention the fact that they have been putting in dough into an oven overnight and they're baking bread. Now, that's the only way you get away with Tesco being a producer. Keep it simple, stuff like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Green Isle, McCain's, frozen food, chips, that sort of stuff, all very straightforward. Give a good, decent definition of competitive relationship, over-answer the question I'll be saying there in general, and then we're looking at price and quality. 50-mark questions, I give 5 each of those. Price as a heading, quality as a heading, you know, and we talk then about what price, how the consumer benefits, and we talk about quality as well, how the consumer benefits, and I've kind of hammered home the point about discuss. Discuss officially is explain, mini paragraph, no heading, put down more information than normal. Right, illustrate the role of interest groups in business. I suppose the power of self-publishing there. I hadn't intended the whole thing to be squashed together, but I suppose it's when you go off to the lady who did an excellent job now, in fairness to Siobhan, but I would be kind of separating that paragraph because from a correction point of view, 1 year, you know, I remember a person getting 100% years ago, and I remember looking at that they had put dots before all their points, and it was almost like I'm a paragraph. Corrector mark me as a paragraph. So if you've kind of 2 dots in there, it shows it's 2 separate points. And then my example was very much a lockdown example. The Consumer Association of Ireland called on the Irish government to resist changes to the airline refunds policy, which involves passengers being offered vouchers in lieu of cash refunds. Right, and I've written down there, make sure the example is clearly visible. That's something that students forget all the time. The evaluation or the example seems to get forgotten all the time through. Then we're looking at describing the question here I've written in about it is, it's an open question on relationships between stakeholders. And remember, stakeholders is one of the first definitions in the entire book. We're talking about this idea of a person being, or whoever's affected by the actions of a business. I think we've got 9 official ones, and the manager gets thrown in to the same category. But all I've done there is separated the whole thing into 4. Make sure the student is talking about 2 relationships, and certain ones go together, like a producer and a consumer, employer, employee, entrepreneur, investor. They all go together there. We'll go next page. It's the standard one there. It's about contracts. I kind of picked the more difficult one. Outline 3 remedies for breach of contract. Damages, specific performance, rescind the contract. Also make sure the nice easy question of contract elements comes up very often. The question on invitation to treat, whatever that means, hasn't been asked since 2008. Okay, so anyone they're looking at that, maybe I think 13 years ago, since I think that the 2020 paper had marketing concept on it, and that wasn't asked in donkey's years either. So we're looking there at that one. Ending a contract comes up all the time. The mock paper now was slightly confusing this year, because remember, that mock paper for Examcraft was set, I'd imagine, long before the 2020 paper, which is why there was such an overlap on those. Anyway, law of contract is usually a nice, easy one, as long as people are specific and they don't put down the word warranty in the wrong context, because people put down a warranty and a guarantee has been the same thing, which is not correct in law of contract, because you've got to have a condition and a warranty going together. Evaluate then, in my opinion, the role of each of the following in protecting consumers. Small claims procedure, small claims court, government ombudsman, then the place where you can complain if you're not happy with your leaving cert results. I think it's about 7 or 8 stages, and the ombudsman is the last stage of that one. So in my opinion, again, the evaluation, I could have said in my opinion, it's a fast procedure with minimum red tape, and I've saved the €25. I've saved the fact to go in there into the evaluation. And then we're looking at the ombudsman again and the evaluation for that one. Kind of a tricky one is outline the main functions of the Ccpc. Now, the Ccpc was up a couple of years ago, and you have to get the whole thing right for all the letters. I know it was up in 2020 and you have to get as well, but make sure there's no Competition and Consumer Protection Commission. It's a difficult one to remember for 0.5% or whatever you get if it comes up as a short question. Exam Watch there are more or less saying, you know, have it pre-prepared, because there's probably about 10 or 12 pages of recommended notes on the Consumer Protection Act. If you kind of put 4 of them there, the underlined one is a heading or a first piece of knowledge, and your paragraph remaining, assuming the information is correct, is your second piece of knowledge. My advice there is prepare an answer like this, as the section is long-winded, okay? There's a lot of stuff in that particular section. You're better off preparing in advance. For anyone sitting in the written paper anyway, preparing for that particular part would be advised. On a bit to consumer, to labour law, I went back to consumer law again with the harder questions at the end of it. Just watch there for discrimination. Every single time the question gets asked, and that's been asked recently, you need the words less favourable. In fact, you need the whole definition as it is there. Okay, the whole definition must be, no other definitions acceptable there. You know, end of story. Unfavourable, no good. Not favourable, no good. Must be less favourable. Learn it off as it is, because it's a piece of legislation. Nice little handy question then. Outline the impact on trade unions of the main provisions of the IR Act of 1990. 20-mark question there. I've written in there the word detail. You need detail for outline. Probably you've over-answered the question in the book there, where you've got a heading and you explain what a legitimate trade dispute is under the heading. The procedures for going on strike, and something there I added in. So if it's a case of you happen to have the book with me, you don't have the book, which it's important there, because I know 1 year they asked to say sanctioned by the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. You'll find that in the solution if you're looking at examinations.ie. So holding a secret ballot, the verdict is yes, sanctioned by the Irish Congress of Trade Unions. 1 week's notice, and that ex parte junction thing goes back to the very beginning in 1990. If you're teaching that long, which is not likely. Now, it specifies the rules on primary picketing, okay, and again, there's no primary picketing and no secondary picketing. I've written in there, do not use the word picket as a form of industrial action, okay? Don't use the word picket, because people confuse, okay, picket what it is, you know what it is, but strike is separate altogether. Strike is the action Picketing is the, you know, what you're doing as part of the action. So it's not wise there, because you get your marks for strike, you won't get the marks for picket generally as a heading. And then define legitimate trade dispute under the IR Act and outline 4 legitimate reasons for dispute. Is going to link to the previous question. You need the definition of a legitimate trade dispute, and you need it in full. Okay, need it in full there. Going further, outline 4 reasons for a fair dismissal under the legislation. Again, name and explain 4 nice, easy ones there. That's the questions from the book from Unit 1. I have added in a couple of more ones as well that I've kind of handpicked, more difficult types of questions. I'm watching the clock, we're 20:07, I haven't left Unit 1 yet. Students would find Part 2 difficult. Part 1 is grand. Look at Part 2. Describe one example of a cooperative relationship which could arise between each of the following pairs of stakeholders. That now would be not a question that people would have been great on, because what you're doing is you're incorporating the word cooperative relationship into the employer and the employee. So you've got to say what cooperation is between them. And then you do it again between the investor and the manager, which is really the investor and the entrepreneur of business, the same thing there, and the producer and the consumer for 20 marks. So you must incorporate, you don't have to repeat the definition, but you must show clearly that that particular part is important. There's my sample answer to it there, and it's a winner-winner relationship. Describe the provisions of the Sale of Goods and Supply Services Act of 1980 and evaluate its effectiveness. I put it in because it comes up so often. Statutory rights are worth lots of marks usually. Most importantly, they're merchantable quality, you know, this idea of a minimum adequate standard, but like something is going to be durable in relation to the price paid for it. Okay, durable in relation to the price paid for it. And again, like you're looking at the major ones there, but I've seen students in the past who have got, you know, loads of points written down on the Act, but they haven't explained them or they haven't outlined them or whatever, and therefore you lose the marks for, you know, for the explanation part of it. Always show the evaluation separately. Evaluation, in my opinion or judgment, this important piece of legislation offers consumers the protection of statutory rights. This puts pressure on all retailers and means the phrase caveat emptor, that the buyer beware, is less relevant nowadays. That act goes back to 1890 or 93 or some way year before, even before I was born. Now, read the information supplied and answer the questions which follow. INMO, it's a question from a couple of years ago. Outline 3 reasons other than pay for industrial disputes. Straightforward enough. Discuss the procedures which must be followed before official industrial action can take place. So again, like that stuff is repeated. Just what I've written in here for number 2 is it's not the same as procedure for a fair dismissal. If you're looking at 2012 paper, it was a hard question asked. It was hard because I think it wasn't in the textbook, which makes it extra hard. The correct procedure under the Unfair Dismissals Act, starting off with counselling and advice. But students tend to get confused between that and the procedure for going on strike. And that's just an overlap of a question we had a few minutes ago. As is this one, outline 2 types of official industrial action available to employees involved in industrial dispute with employers. I'd always go with official strike or strike even and work to rule. Now you have your go slow and token stoppage, but I would say that strike is kind of the most important, work to rule is the second most important one of those. Remember re-picketing, I've written that in there to remind myself to say to you, you know, for strike, you can say like what the people will picket in a strike situation, but don't confuse, you know, don't put down picketing as being your official industrial action, because strike is the answer and picketing is only duplication. Right, that's the end of Unit 1 at 7:22. It's not doing too bad. Unit 2 is short, as you well know. Here we're looking at, you know, again, I've written down here, watch out for the following and how things have evolved in the last 20 years. Like, don't use leadership, communication, motivation, planning, organizing, controlling anymore as entrepreneurial characteristics. I can't guarantee that someone's not going to marks, but I would say to you, keep it simple. Keep it to the ordinary enterprise characteristics and skills in your book. I'd even go as far as saying that that bit of a barrier that existed between characteristics on one section of the book and skills on the other has kind of been removed, and we now talk about characteristics / skills. And the key thing is just don't mess up there with your other management words instead, management skills, you know, activities, etc., because it's just, there's a high possibility that you won't get anything for it. Okay, now as the examination will tell you, marking schemes are no guide, but they're a good enough guide in certain areas, and I'd say to keep away from there. Hardworking or ruthless, I've written in there as an extra, might not score, so keep it simple. Okay, Keep it simple. Stuff like innovative now and risk taker, all those kind of ones are keeping it simple. Define entrepreneurship and outline methods that a Duke of Printer printing company can use to encourage you 20 marks. Popular with the examiner was also asked in 2020, which isn't much good to us now if we're looking for expecting to come up maybe 21. Don't forget benefits of entrepreneurship. And there's an ABQ out there for any of me who's new teaching the subject, Castle something hotel about 2010 there. It's a good example of entrepreneurship because you've got 3 cases of it in the passage, and it's an easy one for students to remember as well, even though I see the marking scheme there for 2020 and all sort of fancy examples of entrepreneurship. The methods of encouraging entrepreneurship then I've written down for exam watch, things like always reference to business, mention a Duke of Print and all those things. They're all extremely important. Now, differentiate between enterprise and management. Illustrate your answer, 15 marks. I've written in Moya Doherty there because I saw something about Riverdance a couple of weeks ago, and that was kind of fresh in my mind. I know that like enterprise management is the kind of daily, the kind of school principal being the manager sort of thing, whereas the entrepreneur is the person, with the ideas. And Moya Doherty there was one half of Riverdance back in the early 1990s. Define enterprise, your marking scheme is 442. I've written that in. What is meant by the term SWOT analysis? Just remember, S&W are internal, ONT should be external, and always use pre-planning and decision-making and words like that with it. I've done one here for Nivea for Men. I'm not sure is Porrick Doherty online tonight or not. He was basically too busy farming, but I always use Porrick's one he gave at a conference a couple of years ago on Ryanair. It's a nice one. It's a better one than my Nivea for Men one, even if I say so myself. Right? And then strengths and weaknesses are internal issues. Opportunities and threats are external. It's wise to include 2 points under each stage. Right, further down, now there's more Unit 2 coming again because Unit 2 and Unit 3 together when it comes to extra questions. A couple of nice basic ones starting off there. We're looking at describe leadership, outline 3 leadership styles, 25 marks. A good exam technique there would be say what each style is in your first paragraph and give the result of each style. And don't always assume that autocratic is bad. As you know yourself, when a student is not inclined to leave the class, sometimes a raised voice might be a better way of getting it done. But autocratic, democratic, laissez-faire, what each style is, give a result of each one, and give an example. And for some reason, the Army keeps coming up there. The Army never gets marks for autocratic because you're with a business, okay? So just beware of that one. And I've also written in there to be careful with the likes of, if you ever asked about 2 of them, I'd always be inclined to do autocratic and laissez-faire because they're extreme opposites. Whereas autocratic and democratic are so close together, you could get done for duplication, which means you might say likes to delegate, doesn't like to delegate. That part of stuff there is going to be scored once, and that was a couple of years ago, and that's worth taking note. So if the choice of doing any of the 3 of them, I'd be inclined to say do autocratic and laissez-faire because they have nothing in common really apart from the fact they're styles of leadership. Right, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we gave it there in a 5th-year exam today. Watch out there for physiological, don't be inclined to use the word basic, physiological, physical, whatever. The stages must be in the right order. Most people do well on these, so you kind of name the heading, give your sentence, and give an example of how a manager could apply the different stage. What I've written out here is, okay, the stage must be named correctly. I've also written in there, watch for limitations of Maslow. So watch the limitation of Maslow's stages, because I was asked, and the answer was basic enough. This idea that, we assume all workers have 5 stages in their life. I mean, do we have 5 stages in our teaching careers? Probably not. But the idea there is any one point on the limitation, that we're not all robots in the world of Maslow. By the way, Maslow could be called human needs as well, which is what officially it was called. So beware in case it comes up there because it threw people off a number of years ago. There's a memo. I only made the list there because memo and signature are often omitted in the Leaving Cert. They haven't asked a memo in years. Memorandum, signature, the 2 things people are less likely to get right. Define span of control, outline factors that affect a firm's span of control. Again, what I'll say to you, I've said in the book there, is make sure you are using specific material because people get very creative when it comes to the stuff about delegation and span of control. And the subordinates, type of work, and the nature of the manager are all important. But and also watch out for the wide one and the narrow one. They've been asked a couple of times as well. For example, I always give the example of, that in junior infants you might have 27 in the class, and in the creche across the road you only have 9 of a span of control, and yet the kids are going to be, a couple of months apart. Anyway, discuss is the whole big outcome verb there, mini paragraphs. The statement that planning is the most important management activity. Do you agree with the statement? So you must say yes or no there. Yes is easier to say, by the way. Support your opinion with reasons and examples. So we look at that one there, and I've explained in Exam Watch what you need there. And again, like you're looking for, I always would consider the big three of planning there to be strategic, tactical, and contingency. Now, mission statement and SWOT are making their way in as far as the sample answers or whatever. And sometimes you see manpower planning. Strictly speaking, I think manpower planning should get back in its own unit, which is unit 4, right? Even though you could be told that unit 2, 3, 4, 5 are linked together. But anyway, I didn't think it was very fair to ask manpower planning in a question on other kinds of planning. Beware of that one, and either know them all or beware of the problem with it. I think I mentioned strategic planning and contingency planning again later. Right, question communication, be very careful. Not the easiest one to teach now, and also not the easiest one when it comes to the exam. What I will say is the section is so watery that it's probably easier to score marks as long as people are inclined to write, because it's not something that's very factual or something that's very, very definite. In that question there, I've used the word stakeholder. The factors considered when choosing the correct form of communications, your stakeholder, appropriate language, your stakeholder, confidentiality, employee, etc. That's all just straightforward stuff. It's advised to reference stakeholders in the above section as it brings structure to the answer there. Now, the importance of good communication, again, a watery enough question for the smooth running of a business. Pick kind of factual stuff like clear instructions for employees, employee morale, suppliers, customers, the relationship with those. Do you email them back? Do you ignore the complaint? Do you lose their order? All that sort of stuff. Now, here's a question I've singled out because we talk about communication. We're going back to enterprise now for a second, but there was a bit of a barrier to communication here because this question's from a good few years ago. Being decisive, creative, and being prepared to take risks are personal characteristics often associated with entrepreneurs. Outline these characteristics and support your answer with examples, right? Now, in the case of there, like the reason that question I put it up there at all is because a sizable number of people wrote down being prepared as a point, okay? Whereas it should say being prepared to take risks, right? And my example there, and this I think I saw Nationwide last week, Robert Mazzella, he's a country western singer by day, or was by day, or by night, furniture maker by day. I think he's a business recently. Noel Reeves, actually, a friend of mine who has gone from a trade show stand builder to having his own pizza company. Another friend of mine then has mentioned about a guy who runs C Sessions in Donegal, and he would have set up the C Sessions one, and it's a risk setting up, I suppose, any kind of concerts, etc., is a risk, and I've mentioned there. So be careful of being prepared versus being prepared to take risks. That's important, okay? Being prepared versus being prepared to take risks. I'm not talking about like one student in every 100 doing it. I'm talking about like 20% of the people writing down being prepared instead of being prepared to take risks. Now, maybe they might have said a moderate risk taker might have been a better question. Right, 7:30, so we keep going. Describe the functions of the different meetings held by limited companies. Now, again, this one gets awkward because we're in the overlap, but we're now on to the new company legislation. What I will say to you is annual general meeting. For the likes of those, you must get those 4 or 5 points down I have on the screen, like an auditor's report must be in there. Declaring a dividend must be in there. The other points there wouldn't be as important, but make sure you know what you're talking about. EGM, don't ever call it emergency. Extraordinary general meeting, a board meeting. Specific information on the agenda of the AGM there is needed. It hasn't been asked in years, but definitely it was not a popular question when it did come up. A question that was popular, I think it was 2012, was distinguish between the duties of a chairperson and a secretary in the organising and running of an annual general meeting. Standard points there, sort of, I call those only chunky points, bit of information given there as opposed to bullets, and duties of the secretary. Do not overlap your common points, distinct points. Like, don't say the chairperson sets up the meeting and the secretary sets up the meeting. If they set up together, pick 3 distinct points for chairperson, 3 distinct points for secretary, and you're better off that way. I put a question on planning here because people tend to lose marks on the definition. Planning is out of specific goals and objectives, kind of covering yourself there, because I know 1 year targets was awarded years in a definition, and then we're talking about their strategies and course of action. Make sure people know the definition, and that one there is pretty much acceptable enough. Strategic, we're looking at the words long-term, we're looking at senior management, we're looking for an example. Tactical, short-term, we're looking at middle management, and again, like I've seen the word operational and tactical coming together. I see operational made its way onto the marketing scheme this year. That's a kind of a new one, but tactical and operational the same as far as I'm aware. Third one there is a contingency plan. So when the Leaving Cert was called off last year, was there a contingency plan? No comment on that one, but in relation to, it's a backup one. There I can recall a very spooky thing happened to me a couple of years ago. I hit as far as the contingency plan, and automatically the school fire alarm went off. It was almost like I planned the whole thing, to give an example of why we have to walk out into the cold on winter days. Anyway, define delegation. Outline the benefits of delegation to the success of a business there. Take note of the definition, because I would always say over the years, make sure that apart from saying you're sharing tasks, that the word authority is in there, the word responsibility is in there, and the word power is in there, right? Get those in there, because they are, to me, keywords of delegation, right? They're in the marketing schemes. There's nothing major there of that one. Just be aware of it. Authority, responsibility, and power. In fact, get them to write down all three, and you're better off. And put span of control in there as well, and make sure you mention things like the ideal number of people under the supervision of somebody. Okay. Benefits of delegation. Then we look at the name and explain standard textbook stuff there. Improves efficiency. A lot of those points are the same there. And if Margaret has raised her hand, I hope Rachel can deal with it there, because I don't know how to. Basically, I'll go further down.
Sorry, can I just interrupt there? There's no point raising your hand. We can't unmute you. We don't have that function. So Margaret, if you want to pop your question in the Q&A section, I have 3 questions already banked for Philip when he finishes talking. Sorry, Philip.
Okay, thanks. Right, explain the methods a business could consider to minimize the risk of bad debts as part of its credit control system. A bad debt is not a good debt, so that's an exam one year. It's something that generally people are, even accounting students aren't great at it, right? We're doing one of the assessments today, and I gave this question, and he says, can I put down my definition from accounting from it? I'm kind of going, if you can, great, but it's a question on credit control. Controlling to me is the most important part of the management ones. From the point of view of what's important, I'd be drilling, planning, organizing, I'd be drilling, controlling even more, particularly stock control, quality control, and credit control here. In particular, people are far more likely to write down the word creditors. Reality, we're talking about debtors, and that's a specific answer, and it's something there that it causes problems all the time. That's why I've written down great chance of reappearing, right? Not because of any inside knowledge, just because the fact that it's one of those ones that if you read the chief examiner's reports, they keep on recommending things like students are not great at certain topics. Controlling is often a weak area for students. I forgot no one reads chief examiner's reports. Anyway, so we go to unit 4, and it shouldn't take us too long because most of the stuff here is sort of from the book. I've only one question added in, and it's 7:36, and I want to kind of finish around 10. Possible? Right, describe the 3 main short-term sources of finance used by a business. A couple of years back, this question was very, very poorly answered. Like you'd expect it in most cases, sources of finance, and don't be surprised in the applied business question if you see sources of short, medium, long-term. Make sure factually people know what short, less than a year, bank overdraft, trade credit, accrued expenses. You know, it's an area that comes up very, very often. Next one there is just acquisition of a car. We're looking there at the medium-term sources of finance. Again, factual stuff from the book. Awkward question, illustrate the usefulness of the debt equity ratio in helping a manager to monitor the financial performance of the business. I've written in there, difficult for even accounting students. And accounting students do the gearing ratio, which the version I use is different than the one I use when I'm teaching business. But beware there, I've written down DE, like it's a very specific question. And there's no excuse really when people say, I hate ratios, I can't do them. They come up all the time. As far as I know, there was no trace of them. And in a big way in 2020, and like a good question there, someone who learns off the 6 ratios, so the 6 ratios there, like in the back of the book there, first plug of the night, I'll put in, we can't see it there, but put in the whole table of ratios and table of important things to remember, okay? And that there's just a standard answer, but be careful because it's an area that people don't get right. I only asked the question on debt versus equity for expansion came in 2020. I'd have been happier to see them holding off until 2021. Right, what I've written in here, and this is all standard stuff, and I know that Rachel has mentioned this before in one of her own talks. We're looking at formula, figures, answer, and comment. So that's generally how the paper is marked. Formula, and be careful there in getting your, the first 3 of them are percentages. The second 3 are is to 1, is to 1, is to 1, and get that right. See the formula, which you should know, copy in the figures, do the answer, kind of put it across in columns if you want, and the comments then, you have to know what profitability is, have to know what liquidity is, have to know what capital structure is, the basic stuff on that one now is what you need to know. And when I've written down there 0.68 is to 1, 0.93 is to 1, the real good student will tell you exactly in relation to every euro that falls due. We've only got 68 cents to meet it. All right. So formula figures answered there. My comments are kind of long because I'm a firm believer that is better than less. There. I think someone needs to mute their mic there. Anyway, it's not my garden shed anyway, it's making the noise. So use the structured formula, figures, answer, and comment for that one, and then more questions again. And particularly, there was someone who mightn't have done accounting themselves as a teacher for Leaving Cert, you know, be careful on those particular comments, because you kind of have to know what you're doing there with debt equity and be able to distinguish the profitability aspect, the first 3 ratios, the second 2 ratios, and the gearing or debt equity one as well. And I've mentioned there about, you know, half the marks are going for getting the trend. You're saying liquidity is improving, or profitability is improving or getting worse. And by the way, the only one you don't want to get higher is debt equity. You want your gross margin rising, net margin rising, return on capital employed rising, current ratio, asset test kind of going up to 1 is to 1, 2 is to 1, or 2 is to 1, 1 is to 1. The debt equity one you don't want to rise, and watch out there, because it's a good idea to always compare the 2 columns, because you usually see the answer there in that. Right, outline the benefits of teamwork in an organisation, 20 marks, usual stuff there, standard textbook information. Watch the layout of that. I've had no comment to make on it, it's nice and easy. I explained 5 different methods of reward for employees in a business organisation. This came up in the exam craft mock, and Fiona raised her hand there if you want to ask Rachel a question in chat. I'll get to it around 10 to 8, I hope. We'll go past all those because they're fairly straightforward. Internal recruitment, external recruitment. They love asking you human resources management, and be careful there. And the example I've used, Ryan Giggs would have been an internal appointment for all those interim appointments with Manchester United. And then Jose Mourinho had 7 other clubs, well, he had 7 since he left United as well. But they will be internal versus external appointments. And you know yourself in a school situation, the internal appointment for principal or vice principal, or it's called, and the external one as well. No comment on that either. Now, define each of the following: job description, person specification, and panel interview. And I see a small little mistake in the book there where I've called it down here job interview. I should have called it panel interview, and I have answered it. Know the significance of panel. So in a panel, X factor job here, 4 people on it. You must mention several people, many people, or whatever. There could be 3 people: the nice one, the not so nice one, and the kind of psychologist one who's watching the body language. Anyway, a panel, a group of people. No job description, the tasks, the person specification. They want to know those fairly well now, because they come up very often. No significance of panel. Illustrate how a good relation between employer and employees can be developed. Bizarrely enough, it's been asked once in 20-something years there. Down the bottom there, I see it's a kind of fairly up-to-date example by accident. A software solutions company called Workday was ranked as Ireland's best large company to work for in 2019, and they announced, I think, 400 jobs this week. Employee well-being is a major focus area of management, right? Employee well-being, you know all about that. Anyway, describe what is meant by performance appraisal of employees. Again, we're talking human resources. You really want to know all the functions, or they want to know, I should say, all the functions of human resources. It was up in the ABQ last year. It's generally the definition of each function is important. The benefits of performance appraisal and the drawbacks of performance appraisal. And if you're looking for drawbacks there, you know, look at the time we lose ourselves when we're assessing the students, right? So it's always going to be an issue. Now, I think, and again, I don't know, is Ross Horgan, who I've never met, but I follow him on Twitter and we have an odd chat back and over. I know that he did a very, very good piece with an excellent piece even with Breffney. And he mentioned the kind of get out of jail cards idea. And I would consider the page here, you know, generic answers that covers positive managerial traits. Like you can use the words improves quality for the customer, employee develops new skills, better decision-making, better morale. For wishy-washy points that say nothing, I nearly always score marks. That's my out of card one. You could use it for entrepreneurship, you could use it for democratic leadership, you can use it for a facilitator, all of those points there. We'll go further into training and development. Now, what I would say to you there, training is easy enough. Is training and development of staff important? And it's a yes, no answer there. Development is something that, question from a couple of years ago in the short questions, induction training has to be new employees. For staff development, you can say existing employees there, but make sure that people know what development is. You know, people often say you can train a robot. You cannot develop a robot to be, you know, immersed in company ethos and improving the well-being of the employees. Right, so watch for development, because it's one of the ones, and even the Chief Examiner's reporting mentions that development was a weak area there. Discuss the importance of TQM. I put into paragraphs. Down the bottom I gave an example, which I obviously Googled during lockdown when I wrote the book there last March, April and May, nothing too fancy. Discuss, again, big tick answer here, tick by way of volume. The change of a man from controller to facilitator. Now again, I'd always link autocratic and democratic, that couple in ABQ, something like that. Refer to areas such as the empowerment of workers and total quality management in your explanation. Like all I've done there is put in a series of lash down the information really, because more is better than less. The skimpy, nice little answer, beautifully presented without the meat, probably won't get you the full marks. That's the case of me going overboard on a discussed question. Exam Watch there says as much as well. Again, a question that causes problems. Outline the strategies that could be used to successfully manage change in an organization. Only use, in other words, like, don't go into the exam, tell them to go into the exam. People see the strategies as an invitation to make up stuff. So not an invitation to make up stuff there at all. It has to be fairly accurate stuff we're talking about. Define risk management and outline the strategies used by business to reduce risk. Planned approach is a key point there. So is identifying risks, etc., calculating costs. And then we're looking at the standard stuff in the book there. From any textbook, we're looking at how you would reduce risk. And reducing risk there is in the context of insurance. I see in 2020, the old holiday voucher came up and a tax question again. It was up in 2013 and 2018. Holiday voucher is taxable. Now, generally, students will do very, very well in a question like this, because let's face it, what we do is an awful lot lower standard than what's ordinary level maths for Leaving Cert at this level. Show all the workings and figures in words. Watch for monthly, weekly, or annual. And remember that the holiday voucher is taxable income, but is not included in gross pay at the final calculation of net pay stage. Be careful on that one. So if someone's on €78,000 plus £2,000 for a holiday, the 78,000 goes down the bottom when it comes to calculating net pay, but the 80 grand goes up the top when you're working with your PAYE, PRSI, and universal social charge. Further down, tax calculations were asked last in 2018. Again, like there's not usually marks going for the words, but I would be inclined to say make sure the students are decent on presentation there, right? And OF there means own figure. Like it's kind of hard to be wrong in some of those. And yet, if you don't show all the stages, I know in 2008, if you didn't show all the stages, you could get the correct answer and score 14 marks out of 20, right? And you're wondering where things went wrong. Watch out as well, monthly. The word number 12, divided by 12 gets yourself 2 marks there. That's that one. Define a proposal form, despite the fact it's pretty much a junior cycle question, was badly answered a couple of years back, outlined 3 insurance principles. This came up now in 2020 again, you know, be careful, the old average clause is a rule, it's not an insurance principle, and I've said that there too as well, and I've nothing really more to add to that. Factors we consider when choosing a source of finance, comes up in getting started, comes up in finance, that's fairly straightforward. Cash flow forecast purpose, straightforward question. The reasons why households prepare a cash flow forecast, reasons why business teachers prepare a cash flow forecast in their households. Anyway, standard stuff. Okay, be careful there about things like, you know, that we don't tend to spend $3,000 or $4,000 at a time. We tend to pay it off installments, etc. That sort of stuff. And again, I'm looking here, and apologies, anyone who's bought the book. I see I put in the letter D here twice. It should be E. There's the answers. Cash flow forecast. I think practicing those questions is about the only way there. 16 grand should be the letter E there. Apologies for that. Outline limitations of ratios, the means of monitoring a business. That's only in there because it was badly answered. It's more of an accounting question than a business question. In other words, looking at ratios doesn't give all the answers to the person who's analysing the accounts. Okay, a question I've added in there to Unit 4. Pay as you earn, PAYE, value added tax and corporation tax are examples of taxes relevant to a business. Make sure there's a good definition known of those. And also, advice, corporation tax is not a tax only paid by foreign direct investment companies. We hear in the news all the time, and students hear in the news all the time, it is a tax on company profits. It don't matter if they're here in Ireland and they are paying tax, and I have no comment on that either. You know, make sure that you're going to get that right. PAYE, know the facts about that. Value added tax, a tax on goods and services. Corporation tax, a tax on company profits, and you can give your rate in 12.5%, and your VAT come back up to 23%, and PAYE 20 and 40%. The awkward bit is evaluate, ouch, the implications of each tax for a business. Now, students tend to ignore that part and say there's no relevance there whatsoever. That's where a H1 or a H2 comes in. You evaluate the implications. So any implication, be it a good implication, like is PAYE good for the person doing payroll who is snowed under? Is it good for the employee who feels that they're taxed to the hilt? Value-added tax, what does it do to the actual price of goods and services? What does it do to the person who's doing the books and submitting VAT returns? And corporation tax, we can talk about the good implications of all why the foreign companies come to Ireland, etc. So watch out of evaluation implication, in separately there, in separately there, in separately there, for a reason. It's a question that people did not get right, do right, do right, 5. And therefore, like, I'm not an awful lot extra to say with Unit 5 because a lot of new stuff in there in that section. And that's a question on the outline the functions of a business plan, 20 marks. Do you need about 6 points or 5 points? Probably not. More is better than less. Going into an exam, you can tell it to anyone. Describe the main challenges to be considered when setting up a business. Getting people to buy our product is the major ones. But anyway, product or service, raising finance, that's all textbook stuff there pretty much. Normal stuff. Distinguish between the main production options available to a new business there. Job production, batch production, mass production, designer wedding dress must be stated there. For job, wedding dress isn't good enough. Batch production, you got to get the first line sentence. Normally, it's usually limited groups of identical cheap products are made, and mass production there at the bottom, car manufacturing being the example of those. Distinguish between mergers and takeovers as methods of expansion. Make sure you get your definitions right here. Definitions are hugely important. I've written down complete control because the whole idea of complete control there is that when one company takes over another. I know in a previous life I worked in a betting company back in took a year off from teaching, and I remember we were taken over, and the takeover took place at something like September the 12th at 12 o'clock that night, and the company I was working for were called Joe Malloy, and we got taken over by Celtic Bookmakers, which means Joe Malloy disappeared overnight, right? After that particular takeover. I have 2 examples in there that are fairly betting example into the merger, and a Mayo example down the bottom about Westport. I'm from Mayo originally. Someone said today, your man there is from Dublin. He's not. He lives quite happily in Dublin, but he's from Mayo, right? Don't let losing them. Now, contrast equity and loan capital as sources of finance for expansion for 30 marks. I was kind of lining this question up to say it might come up in 2021, it came up in 2020, right? It's been up awful often. I often use Michael Gallagher's EGS business, very, very handy for going through revision. And if you look up, you click on expansion, you'll see how often that question has been asked. Contrast there, bulky answer, show the difference between a few of those. My example there, Central Parks Development in County Longford was partially funded by 165 million of debt from a consortium of banks. I think the other 85 million was equity even investments. Marketing mix is asked almost every year. Lash down the information on product, the keywords, product, price, place, promotion, get the keywords in there and does not be shy. Keywords like branding, design, product life cycle, price, strategies, factors, channel distribution, promotion, advertising, PR and sponsorship, all that kind of stuff. And remember an example there which you got by looking up Nike during the summer. The example is not as important as the factual information or the knowledge. No one wants the story of Nike. What they want is Nike incorporated into the marketing mix there. And their exam watch tells you that. Further down, same story, 3 promotional methods. Make sure you know the definitions of the likes of advertising, public relations and sponsorship, etc., which I'll come to down here in a moment. There's the outline, the uses of a break-even chart. I'll skip break-even for the minute because I've break-even done in as an extra method, so we'll skip that one there and we'll get back to it in a couple of minutes. We'll be done by 8 o'clock, don't worry. Analyze the development process of a new product or service of your choice. Question could be asked for the AB this year. Make sure pages are correct and make sure you know your keywords there, the likes of brainstorming, etc. One I've seen a lot of in product screening is people say you could carry out a SWOT analysis, and that is correct and that is allowed. Again, anyone who's raised their hand there, I can't answer because I can't unmute you, but I will be finished in a few minutes, and Rachel then will go through a few questions for anyone who wants to hang on to listen to the answers.
People who are raising their hands, sorry Philip, the people who are raising their hands, if they want to put their question into the Q&A function, I have them listed here, so if you go to the Q&A function you can pop in your question.
Yeah, thanks Rachel. So again, like that's kind of, PlayStation, I happened to know a fellow who was working at the time on it and he gave me the information there on it. Way too technical for me, right? I think the one time I played FIFA against my kids, I lost 4-0 because the controller was upside down, or so they told me anyway. They're delighted with themselves. Anyway, we'll move on from that. Branding was asked in 2020. say there ruefully. Nike is a famous brand of sportswear. Was that in because Nike got you 2 marks and saying was sportswear got you 3 in a previous question. Marketing mix, design, packaging, there's nothing too much there. Of absolutely nothing really extra on those. Life cycle, make sure you put in the mountainy shape on that one because you lose marks if you don't. Put in for any new examples in on that one. If asked how to extend the product life cycle, change the 4 Ps. Okay, that question has been asked very often. You can waffle away all you want about the life cycle. You must mention that you're going to, we'll say for example, reduce the price or change the product or use a different kind of promotion or find a different place, etc. in terms of channels of distribution. Other than the factors a business should consider when choosing a suitable channel of distribution, provide examples. Mine are relatively new on that one there. Have a pre-prepared answer. It's not an easy question. Marketing manager considered when they're selling, sorry, start again. Other than the factors a marketing manager might consider in determining the selling price of brand products and new Irish clothing range for the teenage market, 20 marks there. Standard textbook stuff there, make reference to your teenage hoodie or whatever it's going to be, hoodie, tracksuit or whatever. Describe 4 pricing strategies, comment to make on that. In the past, like you're not going to see really loss leader has been in as a price strategy because over the years, I don't think it was given the marks. Now we're going to go back a good few years. It may change in the future, he says to cover himself. But the loss leader came up in 2020 as a short question. Loss leader, as far as I'm concerned, is a gimmick. All the other ones are price strategies, okay, and they can be very costly because they might ask you strategies and an example, and if you get, for example, penetration and skimming mixed up, you will also lose the marks for the example down the bottom, which can be a problem. Markets there, 3 examples there, no real comment of kind of the stuff is there for you. The examples are pretty modern, pretty new. Public relations, I'd say to you, make sure you get the word image in there, and also new examples impress the corrector, and they're all newish examples that I would have researched during and you've got Kate Winslet, whoever she is, and you've got Feed the Heroes during Domino's during COVID, etc. Right, we're near the end. Outline the reasons why businesses engage in prototype development. That makes the list here because for 15 marks, it was difficult. You had to make sure that all the way through your answer, yes, definition was grand, but you have to the reasons why we need a prototype. Okay, what are the reasons? And you can go on then and have given the answer there, but you can make your changes, and it's important for design, and we can use the old carpentry term of measure twice, cut once, etc. Don't launch an unready prototype, etc. On that question, I've done a longer version of the break-even chart in the book because a few people have asked, have you a long version of it? The table for break-even is very important. Now, in fairness, this is very self-explanatory. This is kind of set as steps. It's longer than what the book has got. You know, draw the x-axis. I've told you the number of intervals, number of squares on standard graph paper. Make sure students memorize that the headings. Units, FC, VC, TC, TR, profit and loss. Be careful in case they ask you to write those in full. It might say to you, not abbreviations in a question. Further down there, put the title at the top. So basically, if you read that, you're getting the marking scheme by reading that, okay? Because I've literally put every line in. You can get the break-even point right and still score 18 marks out of 25 if you don't put in all those things like the units at the bottom and the symbol for euro at the side and a title, and then put in your fixed cost, total revenue, and your 3 big labels: break-even point, margin safety, profit, full capacity as well on that one. And the formula was asked once, and the formula is straightforward enough: 20,000 units for that. And there's the break-even point, the break-even chart. That's the one from the book there, the colour version of that one. I think I have 1 or 2 more questions. Outline the factors marketing manager of INTES. Now, take notes. I can recall when it comes to things like students, you know, looking for my paper wasn't corrected properly or all the various things there, you know, in relation to INTES. If the question is about drinks, INTES, make sure they put in INTES in the answer, because there's 2 marks out of 20 going for INTES. That's 2 marks you've banked, okay? 2 marks, even if that stuff is rubbish that you've written. But I mean, if you're coming out back and saying you're 2 marks short of a H1 and the INTES isn't seen, those 2 marks are extremely important, right? Packaging that question is about there. Evaluate the benefits and challenges for a small startup business of choosing a direct channel of distribution rather than selling through wholesalers and retailers. I'm selling this little baby here myself, and they told me they would take 55% of the cost of the book to get it into shops. At the moment, I'm holding out for independent retail, poverty-stricken businesses around the country. But no, so the price you'd pay for getting into Easton's or whatever, now look, you only look next September, October and see it. It is in Easton's because Philip decided that, you know, being a one-man show isn't all it's cracked up to be. So I kind of know what I'm talking about here. The benefits, you save on cost, and you do. Full control of distribution system, and there's 1 or 2 people who ordered the book late last week and early this week. They're going in the post in the morning. So apologies for that. Challenges, difficult to gain brand recognition is important, and evaluation then. In my opinion, the firm that deals directly with the customer has significant savings on costs that outweigh the negatives of a lack of product awareness. Okay, a lack of product awareness. One of my own Twitter people today asked me, you're tweeting about the BSTAI. Who are they? I was kind of going, that is definitely a niche, right? Only certain people know who the BSTAI are, not the general public. Okay, and last bit there is about reasons why other than expansion to increase profit. To that question there hasn't been asked in a long time. That's me done. I'll answer questions. I'm in no particular rush. Rachel, hope you have the easy questions there. Shoot, I remember I haven't seen the modifications. I have about 20 texts here, I'd say, from people telling me what's on it. But anyway.
I actually just put up a comment about that. Some of the questions are about the changes, but I just wrote back to them questions that you won't be in a position to answer them because you haven't read them yet. So the first question there is from Declan Curran. Would you recommend bullet points?
Yeah, go on.
Would you recommend bullet points over paragraphs or vice versa, or a mix?
I would say that if the question is on discuss, paragraph looks better. Like bullet points, I don't know, but like I call them in class, I call them skinny points and chunky points. I'm not too sure how politically correct that is now, but that's what I call them. And I'm kind of saying a chunky point is going to have more knowledge. To me, a bullet point is skinny. I'd say if it was a discussed question, definitely go with paragraphs. If it is name and explain outline on those ones, maybe a kind of a bullet pointy heading, or maybe 2 or 3 bullet points incorporated together, if that makes any sense.
Okay, thanks, Philip. An anonymous attendee asks, when a question asks you to outline, would you be required to give an example to gain full marks?
No is the official answer there. What I will say all the time is sometimes you can gain marks by showing knowledge with your example. The example might just stumble across it might develop the answer for you, okay? Somebody might not have the course knowledge down, but the example tells the examiner. So illustrate or example, but I'd always say to you, if you know one, lash it down. Do no harm.
Okay. Is there negative marking if a student uses a state when the question verb is discuss?
Negative marking, no. We don't normally have time even for looking at those outcome verbs. We're looking at the answer book instead, but no negative marking. What might happen, and in fact, if you put down a state, right, and in the unlikely event then that you put down 3 decent sentences underneath it, you're still going to get full marks because your heading is ignored and your 2 good sentences will qualify as your pieces of knowledge. So if there's 4 and 3 available for the paragraph, your state doesn't matter. But remember, you can always beat that system by converting the little heading that they have in their head, make it into a sentence using prepositions and stuff like that. Convert it. For example, if the question was on factors affecting source of finance, if you put down, if cost is in their head, they can turn the word cost into a sentence on the day, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. For categories of industry and the changing trends in each category, would students be expected to discuss the impact COVID has had on each sector? Well, I hope that.
Bizarrely enough, if that was up in it was up in 2020, and I only had a quick scan through, I didn't correct it. Like, I think what they did was it was before COVID and after COVID, but you'd have to say that yes, in terms, I wouldn't say you have to, but knowing all the COVID stuff is going to be a help. And in fairness, it's an easy question anyway. You're looking at definitions plus the impact. Like those current trends, about 15 of those available you can use. They normally look for 2 or 3. Yes to COVID, have that prepared. The services industry, I suppose, the main one we could look at there has been affected. Hairdressers and barbers.
When giving examples, does it matter if they are generic or specific, e.g. actual companies, entrepreneurs, or saying an entrepreneur?
An entrepreneur is okay. It's okay. I know in the past I have Googled, just back at the time, I suppose, when I was younger and had more time in my hands, I often Googled to see what the example was, right? You could, and then you discover generally it's the local sweet shop beside the school, the local shop, the Spar or whatever is the one they're talking about. But yet, an entrepreneur is okay without specifically saying, they don't ever say, put down a named company or named business.
Okay.
Obviously, if you have a name, better, but I think an entrepreneur is okay. It's what they call it, it's something like an example of entrepreneurship.
Sorry, my computer has frozen again. In a wages question, do you need to present your work in columns?
A wages question, as in tax question?
Yeah, and that's how I'm interpreting that question.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, I presume so. It's the only one I can think of anyway. Yeah. Like in reality, it's figures we're after, but geez, you have to present it properly as well, because there's no guarantee that you're not going to cost yourself marks by having figures all over the place that somebody might miss. Because in those ones there, they're marked in 1s and 2s and 3s. And I would say the student who presents it properly, assume that words are needed even if they're not. Because particularly if you have a class of boys, right? Boys tend to be under pressure for time all the time and be scrollers. I'd say to you, pretend there's marks going for words. I've often been asked things like, is it true that the marketing mix almost must be in the correct order? Sure, look, whatever you're teaching them is fine. You're better off to tell them to do it a certain way, even doesn't matter. Neatness is no harm ever.
But it is nice. I have to say, as a corrector, it is nice.
It's nice, yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah.
Will Philip be updating this great book for next year's Leaving Certs? My fifth years have asked if they should purchase it now or should they wait?
That's a tricky one now. Look, I, at the moment, currently have an inventory of a good few hundred of them left. Like, I would say to them there, like, look, I'd say, obviously going to say get it now. I will be updating. The website's fairly, anyone that follows the blog, I've only got 300 something followers. Like, they get a lot of stuff there. I've been giving out stuff for a long time there. So I will be updating. I would say that I'm not going to be redoing it. It's not going to be re-released again next September. Don't want to be nailing people for money every year, anything like that. But I definitely will come up with something, which means that there'll be updated stuff, as in applied business questions for purchasers of the book or followers of the blog, right?
Okay.
Thanks for that, Rachel.
No problem.
Thanks for that question.
There's 8 more. Under the Sale of Goods and Supply of Services Act, say you needed 4 points. Can you give 3 points on goods plus one other, e.g. merchable quality?
Yeah, no, I'm going to say, bizarrely enough, you can actually get away with 3 statutory rights points. You can get away with merchantable quality, fit for purpose, and as described. Like, you're probably better off going on to the other ones. Now, on that, something I mentioned early on, and I forgot to say it was, in the area of provision of services, right? That's been up a couple of times. It came up again in 2020. It was in the ABQ in 2019. Make sure that you give more than what's in the Act. The Act is going to say to you, have the skill, use the skill. Any materials must be of merchantable quality. You want to be adding in a sentence. How do you get the skill? Education and training. This idea of using the skill, due diligence and care, and merchantable quality you can, mention. Because if you look at the paper, you might remember the talk we had reviewing the paper last November. We said that services and merchantable quality overlapped, because in the services part of the Act, merchantable quality comes up, and it comes up again at the bottom one. Okay, next.
Sorry. Right. That one is very similar. Sorry, that one is all about, that one is the same question again. Sorry. If a student uses a heading in their answer when the verb is to discuss, we've had that already. They won't be penalised for using the heading. Yeah.
No penalised negative marking. Too complicated for us. Only biology does that, I think.
Declan Curran says, correct Philip on the Dundalk. I'm sure that means something to you.
Doesn't they just on Twitter all the time? Come on, the town.
What units are covered in the new question 4? Again, we can't comment on the new stuff at this point. None of us have read it in enough detail.
I will reiterate the point I made at the beginning, and I'm hoping the people are thinking like I am on it. If you look up any chief examiner reports, which are widely available to anyone, right? The percentage of people that do question 1 from unit 1 is over 90. The percentage of people that do question 2 and question 3 can be less than 10. It's definitely less than 20%. I would be thinking that if somebody is supposed to help the students by giving the extra question 4, if it's going to be on Europe and Unit 6, not nice topics. There's no benefit to it. Now, look, I could come back and they could be saying next June he hadn't a clue, had he? But that's why my thinking on it would be there's no real benefit to providing extra questions that students haven't the notion of answering. Okay? And yes, Unit 6 and Unit 7, to counteract the fact that students keeping up rubbish on social media about don't do Unit 6 and 7, don't do Unit 6 and 7. Look at your stats on your short answer questions. They're all over Unit 6 and 7, right?
Okay.
Okay.
How do you know when students should define/explain the keyword in the question in their answer? E.g., explain how consumers may benefit from the existence of a competitive relationship. Philip has a sample answer, and the first thing the student needs to do is explain the term competitive relationship, then give the benefits.
How do you know?
Yeah, how did the student know that they were to explain competitive?
Well, I mean, like you see, when I suppose really, there's certain things, I suppose, in my case, it's just been doing it for so long that like competitive relationship and cooperative relationship is something I lash down always at the beginning. In fact, a lot of people always put the definition down and it could be 50-50 where their marks are going. I'd be pretty much guaranteeing you that competitive relationships or cooperative relationships will always get you marks. Certain things will always need definition and it's in that category. Okay.
And then do you need the table for the break-even chart?
I suppose I would say to you yes, because what happens there is like it's possible to know all the calculations and not be able to draw the curtains, as they say. People are a little bit chartophobic, okay, when it comes to getting it right. I know, Rachel, you use some fancy geo or something I can't use myself. I tried it up on Twitter one day, but people are not good. That's the one, yeah. But in general, there's a whole cohort of students that run from break-even. Now, break-even hasn't been asked in years as a full question. I was up 11.5%. Anyone that can do it gets absolute factual soft marks there. There's only one type of them really as well. But to answer the question of the table, yes, the table has been up in the short answer questions as a game of fill in the blanks. So that, you know, you need the table, there's no extra marks going for it. But what happens is if you end up, I should say to you, if you end up with a bad chart where you have nothing in the chart at all, the corrector goes back and looks into your table and says, you know what, the break-even point is right there, the profit is right there, so yes to the box.
Okay. Yeah. There's one is after coming in there. Would writing out this has to be a maths teacher. Would writing out the coordinates be okay rather than doing the table, as in writing what's going to go on the x-axis, what's going to go on the y-axis?
Well, what I've actually done there in that big long version, it's not in the book, the bit I did tonight, the bit I kind of ran through there at about 10 to 8. That's how I've done it. I put the coordinates in. I didn't teach maths in 20-something years, but the x and y part of it, that's actually what you're doing. You're picking out the coordinates from the table. And like all you're looking at really is on that table, you've got units and you've got FC. FC is nearly irrelevant because you can find that one easy enough. Then you have a column for TC and you'll be using units on the TCs and you'll be using units on the TRs. So it is the coordinates you're doing.
Yeah.
Is it like them out? Yeah. I mean, you're doing yourself no damage because the actual marking scheme is going to be looking for a title, x-axis, y-axis labeled properly, marks for the correct fixed cost, the correct total cost line, correct total revenue line, correct break-even point, correct margin of safety labeled in thousands and all those things, not just 10 or 20, and the profit full capacity as well. So yes to that one as well. Nope, it's no problem. That's actually a good way of doing it.
The last one, the last two questions I think come from the same person, but they said we're at 5 marks. I think somebody needs to mute themselves. Would you advise 4 at 5 marks for 20 marks? And how do you know if it would be a 7 + 7 + 6 question? And is every question state explain example?
Taking a bit at a time there. Look, for 20 marks, you're always safer to say to the students, it's going to be 4 needed. 4 2s, 2 + 3, right? In more recent years, when I would say probably the standard of the student isn't as high as it was in the late 80s when I was in school and all those things. But it's just like, you're fighting for different things now. We're competing with way different distractions, etc. That's why it's gone to 7, 7 and 6. But tell the student it's 4 5s. It's just easier on yourself.
It always starts life at 4 5s, doesn't it? It usually starts life at 4 5s, and yeah.
But like even in recent years, you know, it's moved down to nearly 7, 7 and 6. But to cover yourself, 4 or 5s all the time. How do you know to state, explain, give an example?
Is it all? No, is it every question? State, explain, example.
Except discuss once and list once.
Okay.
And contrast once. Right?
Thank you very much. I think that's all the questions. I see one there about Tipex Moose being used to correct errors, but I don't think we can answer that because that's all to do with the scanning. And I think that's a question for the SEC. I don't think that's one we can answer.
I haven't used electronic marking system yet, so I don't know.
Yeah, that's not one we can answer. And then are the current implications since Christmas of Brexit likely to be asked again? We can't predict.
Don't know. I mean, like, look, if you look at the paper in November, there was stuff from August and September on it. But I think business isn't as complicated as people think as a subject. I don't think they're going to ask us any higher order Brexit-y kind of questions. Yes, if you know your basics on single European market and economic and monetary union, that sort of stuff is sufficient. Maybe protectionism, free trade. But I don't see us getting a big Brexit-style essay. Anyway, I hope when I read those guidelines that they've widened the goalposts for us so our students won't be as tied as in previous years, he says, hopefully.
Okay.
I'm in no rush, Rachel. If anyone's too shy to ask a question, I'm in no rush whatsoever.
I just, in case people want to head off there, I have put into the chat a link to the attendance form. It's just way too much work for us to email it out to everybody. So if you do want the attendance cert, if you could click on the link in the chat there before you leave and download it yourself, we won't be emailing them out from the branch account. So if you would like to click on that link that I have put into the chat, I'll put it in again to be sure, but we won't be emailing them out. So if you could just click on that. The participants that have raised their hand, if you want to add it to the Q&A, I can't unmute you. So if you want to add it to the Q&A, we will go through it. But if people want to start filtering off, I'll stay here. We'll stay here and just make sure that everybody's off. The link is just above where Niamh wrote no link.
Okay. Okay. Just it looks a bit like what the meeting about our submission.
It's sent to all. Oh, it's sent to all panelists. My apologies. Sorry, it's my fault. There we go. There's the link. All panelists and attendees. My fault. I was sending it to myself and Philip. Apologies. Thanks for that. There's another comment in for you there, Philip. Mayo for Sam 2021. I can't say that in my Dublin accent. That doesn't fit. I can't.
Even not for Ireland. We need him down the west, you know.
I can't be saying that stuff.
In our poverty-stricken region, we need Sam Maguire. You know yourself.
776 and 4x5. What is the difference? Do they need to write much more for the sevens? No, sure they don't.
I thought there was a raffle coming up there with a prize the way you showed that one out there. 7, 7 and 6. Look, it's really a sort of a structure, almost like, dare I say it, bell curve kind of a way, because 7, 7 and 6 makes it easier for the student because anyone who knows 3 phrases picks up 12 out of 20. You know, anyone who knows 3 phrases the other way picks up 6 out of 20. So it's only, tell them 4x5, it's just easier there. They have taken on board, I'm reading Rachel here, they've taken on board a lot of the stuff that sort of make the paper easier. Like 3 out of 8 questions now.
Rachel McKenna has given you a rundown of what's been changed on the paper and asked what you think, but we're not going to comment on it at this point. Sure, you're not.
Well, I've got in front of me here. Look, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, anything that makes it easier, right? Several people have sent me this. Like, haven't actually a right look. I suppose no is the answer exactly, but I think anything. What does mean now is that students can. It's me, is it? Students can much better choice. I mean, it's really, I think, it's encouraging people to sit the written paper by the looks of what I've seen so far.
Yeah.
You know.
I think it is.
Right.
Fantastic as always. Thank you. That was brilliant.
That's one of my families in that one in, Rachel. It's okay.
Yeah. Should you define the terms first from an anonymous attendee?
Yeah, I would. Like, look, whatever bit of a legacy they're going to leave on their answer booklet, like never discourage someone from putting down a definition, because even if it's not specifically asked, it may count for knowledge, right? Remember, I mean, someone can come along and they can write something and they can cross it out. And if they don't change the stuff, you correct that as well. I had a person the other day who wrote in the Sale of Goods by Services Act and put a line through it, and they changed it to the Consumer Protection Act. Now, they got no marks there, but generally, if in doubt, lash it down on the page.
For 5 marks, is it 2 marks for state, 3 marks for explain?
Usually.
Yeah.
I've seen it been 4 for stating and 1 for explaining on one occasion, but 2 and 3 is grand, or 3 and 2. In relation to that, like in the short questions, you'll often see it becomes 3 and 3, 2 and 2, which helps the student, because if you get one definition right, you get 6 out of 10, not 5. In the same way as you're looking at your true or false questions, they're nearly always something like 3, 3, 2, 1, 1, which is really helpful to students.
That's actually a question there. Why are the marks 3, 3, 2, 2, 1 for a short question?
That is to help. You see, only about 7%, with say 13,000 people of a normal year would say at higher level, only 7% will get less than 40, can get less than 40, right? And half of those won't even go to school at all, anywhere. They'll be just taking up business for the crack,
And the 3 will always go to the first correct answer.
Answer is the 3.
Yeah.
It was 5 2s, but like it's just easier on the student to award them. Like, I mean, I had someone today in a test who got 3 of the 5 true or false questions right, and they got 8 on my marking scheme. 3, 3, 2, 1, 1.
Will the extra examples be available?
Extra examples?
I don't know what that's about. I presume, did you give extra examples that weren't in the book, or are they all in the book?
Whatever, anything, the stuff we use tonight is all up on the website.
All on the website.
All there. I literally have taken stuff from the book plus 15 or 16 pages of extra stuff. That's all on the website now, and it can be staying there.
Okay, so it's all up on Philip's website.
Yeah, that's www.leavingcertbusiness.com.
I'll put that into the chat. What is it again, Philip?
www.leavingcertbusiness.com. And it should be on the front page, or if you click down the archive site, beneath where it tells you it's 86 days to the business exam, or whatever it says on the site, I can't remember.
Yeah, I hope you're looking at the chat, Philip. There's loads of lovely comments coming in. I think that's all the questions. I think we are ready to end it there.
I haven't looked at the chat.
Sorry, Rachel, there's somebody who's asked me about the cert of attendance. I'm just going to put it back into the chat again. I think with all the thank yous, it's hard to see. So I've just put it back into the chat again for that person.
Band.
Is evaluation considered one paragraph in itself?
Evaluation is always separate. Okay, and the ABQ over the years has been kind of tricky, because if you're evaluating management skills, you might put 3 separate evaluations saying, it's great leadership and give factual information. I would say you probably need to be on the safe side for a higher order answer anyway. As they call it, H1 or H2 student is going to need, probably, in my opinion or judgment, 2 clear pieces of positive knowledge. 2 benefits, basically.
Okay, for anybody who's still there, from supervising exams, from what I know, only black and blue pen are allowed, not red pen, dark pencil only if it is used, and Tipp-Ex not allowed. Just cross out the incorrect word. So that's somebody answering someone else's question there. Brilliant. Keep it coming. The rest of them are all, have you any extra ABQ questions for 3, 4, and 5?
Well, I have 7 extra ones on the website, the ones I normally will be using for this seminar, but I didn't even know people know the website is there, right? But the 7 of them there, they're up in November, and the 7 questions and 7 answers, and I will be putting up more because I have to do a couple of new ones. I nearly wrote a new one yesterday, but I said I wouldn't bother enough to do for tonight, but I'll do a few new ones. Keep an eye on the website, and follow the blog, and follow the blog, and it's free for the moment, so take advantage of that. There'll be a few more in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm after I replied to that question with the address of the website. Okay, Philip, I think that's all the questions. Nobody else has put in any extra ones. So I think we are good to go. I think that's us done, Philip.
Brilliant. Okay. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in, and thanks, Rachel, for organising it.
Thank you very much, everybody.
What is in behind the scenes that people don't know about, that I don't know about, but a lot of good people out there.
Thank you, and just don't forget, I'll put it in one more time because we won't be emailing them out. So if you want to get your cert of attendance there, I've literally just put in the link one more time just to make sure that people get their certs of attendance. Done.
Okay.